Hello, denizens of the internet. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Evelyn Silver, upcoming author of the Bloodline Chronicles Witch's Night with the Wild Rose Press, writer of Bath Book Reviews, aka Books I Read in the Bath, and your disembodied voice attached to a cartoon for the evening. Today's topic is sex and vampires, my personal favorite things. A while back, I wrote an essay for a Gothic literature class on Dracula and sexuality. References to Freud were a requirement for the assignment, but it still turned out pretty good. I hope you enjoy this academic delve into the world's most classic vampire. For anyone who's curious, yes, I got an A on the assignment. If you enjoy this essay, please let me know if you want more academic looks into vampires in the future in the comments section. Presenting Dracula, Gender, and Repressed Sexuality. Written during the tail end of the Victorian era, Bram Stoker's novel Dracula must have shocked readers with its willingness to acknowledge sexuality in such an obvious fashion. There are two main perspectives from which one can view this. One, there's the idea that even mentioning sex and sexual attraction in any context was revolutionary for the time and freeing to all individuals in its acknowledgement of desire. And two, there's also the idea that while Dracula does expose sexuality, it exploits it to play on people's fears and vilifies desires by presenting the only truly sexual characters as embodying a destructive, wanton, demonic version of freed sexuality deserving of punishment. I feel that Dracula is a cover for Victorian individuals to read about things considered perverse without feeling too guilty about it, a way to free what they as a society tried so hard to repress to the point that it became almost horrifying to them. As to why Stoker decided on the Gothic genre to convey such blatant sexuality, the Gothic genre is arguably one of the very few, if not the only genre, in which it would have been socially acceptable to explore the sexual desire of which Victorians disapproved. He mixes it in with elements meant to terrify and horrify people, such as vampires, death, and murder. In this way, Victorians had a path to enjoy sexuality while condemning it. This hypocritical way of looking at sexuality might be one way for the opportunity of conversations about acknowledging sexual desire to get a foot in the door. Or perhaps the horror of sexuality was so ingrained in their minds at the time that it was simply natural to include it in a book about vampires. Sexuality is certainly something repressed, which Freud would relate to the uncanny, that which is frightening and uncomfortable to us. Freud defines the uncanny as something that is familiar, and that familiarity is what is frightening because of its combination with the unfamiliar. Something may be familiar to us because, according to Freud, we have pushed it into the subconscious, repressed it to the point that we are not wholly aware of its existence within us. So, when it appears before us, forcing us to contend with what we've tried to push into the shadows, it provides perfect fuel for the Gothic fiction genre. In the lives of everyday Victorians, their nature as sexual beings is what would have been repressed, causing the emergence of sexual desire in Dracula to become uncanny to them. The first major sexual encounter in Dracula happens when Jonathan Harker falls asleep in the Count's castle, and three women described as voluptuous and beautiful yet animalistic approach him as he wakes, but pretends to remain asleep. Jonathan describes a wicked, burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. The girls talk about who should go first in taking so-called kisses from him, which, unbeknownst to Jonathan, actually means biting and taking his blood and potentially killing him. While they follow this encounter with a little bit of horrific violence, the idea of three beautiful women all wanting a piece of one man is a pervasive male sexual fantasy that has existed for seemingly eons. It's thrived in many cultures, one of the most famous being the fantasy of a harem originating out of Middle Eastern cultures and westernized fantasies about India and Muslim culture. Not only does Jonathan get to experience this by modern perspectives outdated Orientalism fantasy, but Dracula himself has also experienced it. An interesting point brought up by R.B. Yezel in Harems of the Mind, Passages of Western Art and Literature about harems is that westernized fantasies of harems, such as presented in Dracula, exist to compensate for their men's anticipation of monogamy. It is notable here that Jonathan gets to experience the harem while he's engaged, supporting this theory. These fantasies bring a promise of endless pleasure to the realm of fantasy, as stated by Yezel. And quite literally so in the case of Dracula, who offers an eternity of lustful indulgence and the power to take whatever pleasure you desired, whether it be gluttony in the form of drinking blood, or lust and passion in the form of the ability to seduce nearly whomever you liked. In this way, both good and evil male characters get to partake of the harem fantasy, and so morality does not dictate who is permitted this enjoyment. It belongs to all men, as portrayed in the book. The women making up Dracula's harem exist for the purpose of being exploited by the men of the novel. They have no backstory and are not fleshed out as characters. Since they are only harem women, their personal tales do not matter either to the male author who created them to satisfy sexual desires, or to the male characters. Dracula sees them as underlings, and Jonathan only sees them as objects of sexual desire, blind to the danger, of course. While they are suppressed characters in that they are under Dracula's control, it's important to note that they are still powerful characters. Their sexuality gives them a sort of control over Jonathan, and their status as inhuman gives them strength and the ability to physically dominate any human male they might choose. This is the complete reverse of what a proper Victorian man is meant to want as dictated by society at the time. Freud might say that such a desire may be a repressed urge to be controlled by a mother as an adult, but I simply see it as one of sexuality's many forms. However, at the time, any desire for a dominant woman was seen as perverse, because men were almost universally accepted as the dominant half in any relationship. And the spectrum of gender and sexuality was not as widely accepted or even acknowledged at the time. Any man who did desire a woman more powerful than himself would have to repress such desires in a lot of cases. Seeing them in print in the form of 3 beautiful women would probably terrify proper Victorian men, because they would see in these women the fantasies that they fought to keep out of their own mind, an emergence of the uncanny, according to Freud, while they most likely had to make do with a proper chaste wife if they followed society's instructions. This brings up the topic of Mina Murray, aka Harper, and Lucy Westenra, the 2 main women of the novel. They embody the proper, virginal Christian woman waiting dutifully on her husband and or fiancé. They guard their virginity for one man alone, their future husbands, which is highly different from the 3 vampire women. The vampire women express sexual interest in Jonathan, while also clearly having been involved with Dracula. This can give the vampires the same allure as prostitute in Victorian society, as a being that men were not supposed to associate with, but did so in the dark of night and in secret. Mina and Lucy are a complete contrast, and assumedly have no experience sexually. They would have to rely on their husbands to guide and possibly dominate them in bed. In modern-day terms, they embody a virginity fetish, which was mandatory for unmarried women at the time. Marriage in this way was considered an appropriate avenue of desire. Lucy strays slightly. She has several suitors from which she has difficulty choosing the right one for her. In this way, she's a little more promiscuous, even going so far as to wonder aloud why it's not permitted for her to marry 3 men at once. Her encounters with Dracula and subsequent vampirism can be viewed as punishment for straying from her proper path, or possibly making commentary that the desire for multiple men can only lead to an evil existence, similar to Dracula's existence as a man with several wives. In contrast is Mina, who states, "I have nothing to give, Jonathan, except myself, my life, my trust, and that with these went my love and duty for all the days of my life." While Mina does encounter hardship, she is ultimately granted a happy ending, complete with a loving husband and a son. This is perhaps a reward for her dedication and purity. Even though she's not entirely pure, as evidenced by the scene where Dracula forces her to drink his blood in an almost assault analogy of a scene, she did not succumb to Dracula and had to be forced, so it is not her fault and she is not punished with transformation or death. An interesting comparison that ties together the unholy, sexuality, and purity as concepts is bringing religious thought into the mix, a very heavy influence in Victorian society, and also for Stoker, as evidence in that crosses and other Christian holy symbols are harmful to the impure vampires. In Judeo-Christian mythology, the creation story for the Abrahamic faiths features a fall of human beings when Eve, then Adam, accept the fruit from a talking snake, who convinces them to accept knowledge that God has forbidden them. There are different perspectives on this serpent depending on which group's doing the storytelling, but the one I would like to focus on is the Christian perspective that this serpent is either a representative of or the actual embodiment of the Christian devil. The serpent is a demonic being offering taboo pleasure and knowledge, something humanity is not supposed to reach for, but can't help but yearn for no matter how they try to repress it. A snake also possesses a set of fangs. Arguably, the vampire as portrayed by Bram Stoker plays the exact same role. Dracula offers forbidden fruit to various characters: lust, gluttony, the desire for power, things humans crave but are taught not to allow to come to the surface. According to the Abrahamic narrative, humans did accept the forbidden pleasure and knowledge from the serpent and learned to live with the ensuing results. Therefore, it might be an accurate interpretation to say that we are indeed meant to take at least a small taste of the vampire's offer. Of course, during Victorian times, it would have been beyond scandalous to outright say such a heretical claim. Perhaps it was an unintentional insinuation, as in the end, the vampire and the serpent represented is defeated, but it is still present throughout the rest of the story and offers a unique possible glimpse into the repressed sexual psyche of Victorian individuals who longed to taste something more. To me, the most obvious symbol of repressed sexuality is Dracula himself. He is powerful, he is horrific, he is in control, he has many women, and he takes whatever he wants. The very act of sustaining himself is a penetrative exchange of fluids, biting with his fangs to suck blood. He can break into women's bedrooms with ease and access whatever he desires. First, it can be assumed, are his 3 vampire brides before the novel begins. The second is Lucy, and the third is Mina. But Dracula doesn't only embody male sexuality, he's also slightly feminine, straddling different gender roles. In chapter 21, when he sneaks into Mina and Jonathan's bedroom, he cuts open his chest and feeds her in what reads like some sort of demonic version of breastfeeding, an act generally associated with femininity. The way I see it, this paints Dracula as both masculine and feminine, and powerful over all genders of all different species, human and vampire. He is the ultimate avatar of all sexuality and all gender and all desire through which Victorian readers could secretly wish to be or wish to be with, while outwardly condemning him for the unholy monster that he of course is. Men could even read into the text and secretly desire to have him, or be him, because that hint of femininity that leaves him straddling different aspects of gender and not completely fitting into one. It is a perfect cover. Or perhaps Dracula really is just a condemnation of sexuality. I don't believe so, personally. If it was, it wouldn't spend so much time describing the details of desire. Dracula is a thriller, meant to get the blood and thoughts of repressed sexuality racing in its Victorian readers in a way that would make Freud excited. As society has progressed, sexuality and gender are far less demonized in most places than they once were, in part thanks to Gothic novels that allowed sexuality its room in the public eye. It made discussion of these subjects less taboo. Even now, vampirism in Gothic tales serves as avenues for various forms of repressed sexuality, opening doors for what we try to hide from ourselves. I cannot say if that was Bram Stoker's true intention for certain, but I would not be completely surprised if he wasn't at least a little glad for the outcome. Vampires as a way to explore what we outwardly deplore but secretly lust after for generations of readers, and many more to come. Now that the essay has concluded, I would like to mention in regards to Dracula and sexuality, particularly about Dracula's harem of vampire brides, that reading Dracula from a polyamorous perspective is interesting, and I'm hopefully going to do a video in the future about fictional vampires and polyamory as concepts that blend beautifully. I hope that's something for you to look forward to, my dear internet denizens. Thank you for stopping by my channel and watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe to show support for future content about vampires, sexuality, books, and queer subjects, among other topics. Au revoir, and have a fantastic night.